In this lesson, I would like to talk about how to add custom libraries to Cables. So if you're not familiar with the matter, you don't know how hellish and difficult managing libraries was and it still is today. And there are a lot of different ways to achieve the same result. So depending on where you come from, if you're more on the back end or on the front end person in JavaScript, there are different ways to basically include external code. So I try to sum up here and give you the most simple, like I would say, the two ways that work in Cables. And I will skip all the other Node.js, so the JavaScript and the server part here. So the way Cables works is by using this kind of old school, I would say, immediately invoked function expression. I say old school because for years it was the only way to create libraries and to include the library into a page. It's actually quite simple if you think about it. Let's try to decompose this code. You basically wrap everything into a big function, and at the end you call the function. So this function is immediately invoked. And whatever you define the function, you create a new object that you add to the main window object. So the window object is in all your web pages. It's defined by the browser. So it's always available. Everything that is below window, you actually even need to put window dot something. You can, here you need to attach it, but when you use the code, you don't need to reference the window. It's available for the whole web page. So the trick here is to define some kind of an object with functions like this, for instance, and this function is calling our private function. So in a way, we are encapsulating this private function inside our library, inside our, the main library object. So it was, as I said, the very common pattern. And the goal here is try to avoid the namespace pollution, but you can argue that it's still actually attaching an object to the main window. So that if you have many libraries, then your main window has tons of different sub-objects. But it's not a real module system, especially if you come from another programming language. You know how modules can call each other and rely on others. And so it's not really the case here. You basically wrap everything into one big object. And the issue with that, of course, is that also if you have a very big library, but you only need a small part of it, then you are a bit forced to load the whole library just for two functions, which will not be the case with the other technique that I will show you. But this is actually the main way Cables work. Most of the library you can use. So let's try to demonstrate. For instance, the ops that you see here are actually wrapped like this. So we never talked about this, but if I code a new op here, so you have this part where we code the op, right? And the op should appear somewhere. Now, if you go on manage op here, you have the libraries that are shipped with Cables. So here are all the libraries that are already available that Cables knows and can give you. So for instance, P5, which is maybe you heard about processing, so to make cool generative images or videos, something about sockets, a lot of already libraries that you can use. So if I just want to use one of these library, I can simply click on it, and now if I add it, you see that it's added to the library. So if I save and reload, now this library will be loaded when I load this up. So that's the easiest, simplest way. And then you write your code as usual. Okay, now what if it's not in Cables, right? So if I go there and it's not part of these libraries, the only other way you can do is to basically use this. Use library from patch assets. And here you would have to click add, and this doesn't work, I'll show you later, and drag and drop your library as long as it is formatted in this IIFE. So immediately invoked function expression. And I will show you later a full example of this. Let's just, without going into too much detail, let's just look at this editor here. If I open the code, you would see that at some point, so this is called Quill, the library is called Quill.js. And you see I've uploaded this library there. And now I have the path to this library. And it's loaded each time, I mean, at the beginning of the patch. And now I can use it. If I go back to the code, I can use it, and the big object at the window would be called Quill. So when I do new Quill, I'm actually doing window.quill, and it's available very easy into the output everywhere. So if you don't believe me, you can always go here to your developer tools, and if I clear this, and you can do window, so you have to be careful to be in the, so Cables is loading an iframe, so to be sure to be in the patch, you have to go here in the editor frame. And now if I do window, now I have all the window, and it's going to be massive and, you know, big object. And you see Cables is actually, you know, also putting some stuff under the main window, and now we should have this Quill library here. Right, so and now this main object gives me some functions or whatever it's needed for it to work. Okay, so that's the easiest way to load a library. You just drag, you put it as an attachment, and then it's loaded, as long as it is bundled. That's the right word, you can look it up, as an immediately invoked function expression. Okay. Now, the thing with this is that most of the new ways now is a bit like new way to package an app is a bit different. So you would find less and less actually code that is bundled like this over time. And so we move to another system, which is actually less easy to use in Cables, but more efficient. The other system, more modern, is using what we call the ESM, so ECMAScript module, JavaScript module, basically. And this is what I've been trying to explain here on the left. So how does it work? Two ways. Either you write in your HTML a script type, by default it's always JavaScript. Here you have to type module. And then notice how we load a function now. We have this import keyword, which also means that when you create the library, you would have an export keyword. And I'm saying, okay, from this module, import just this function. So if you have many modules, then it makes sense to only load part of the library, just the function that I need. And modules can call other submodules and can also load only what they need. So when you bundle your code, so when you pack your code on the server before putting it for everyone to download at the client side, you can really do something what is called tree shaking, which is going to remove all the parts that are not needed. And you can also, the browser has a nice way to load different modules by opening different simultaneous connection, which is sometimes a good thing, sometimes a bad thing. If you have a bad connection, it really depends on the performance of the website, where is it located. But that's the main change, basically. Instead of just invoking a function and attaching to the main window, you load just this function and it's scoped, it stays within its module here. In Cables, we cannot do this. I mean, you can, but it's not the right way. You will not inject the script type equals module, but the modules are cool because you can also load them asynchronously. So it means that you can load them whenever you want, and you don't necessarily need to put this in the top level JavaScript file. Here, if I only want to load on some condition, then this works. For instance, if I click to export to, I don't know, a 3D file, then I will need to import the right library to be able to export, for instance. And the way to do this is to use an asynchronous function. So this is the syntax. And you await means, because this can take a lot of time, so you are saying wait till this guy is complete and then import the function, and you can use it as before. So this works for modern browsers, but I mean we are doing Cables, so anyways we will want modern browsers. So as I said before, this is completely supported in Cables. This is not. So I will show you what I mean by that. It works, but you need to do some kind of operations to make it work, because if you add a library that is compiled as a module, as I showed you before, by just dragging and dropping here in the files, this will not work, and they will actually crash in the console. So there is still a way, because it's JavaScript. So as long as you can modify and write code, you can always load the library. I hope that this in the future will be solved and that Cables runtime will load the modules directly. But in the meantime, I will show you how to do this. So the example that I wanted to share with you is this one. It's called Detect GPU. It's a very interesting library because it allows you to benchmark how good the computer is. So before running your patch, imagine you're doing a very nice experience and you want to assess whether you are low graphics, medium or high tier graphics. This library is basically benchmarking how to like what's the capability of your hardware. So how I would go about wrapping this library. So first I would go there. I would go on the GitHub, and if I look at the code, I see that okay, this is a node. So this is a library that technically you can install on the backend and then wrap everything, bundle everything, and serve the final application to the clients. But it's not how we do in Cables, right? In Cables, we try to be very modular and have units, which are called ops, that we compose, right? So when I look at this here, I say, okay, there is this import function. So this is not going to be an IIFE. I mean, you can convert this, and I will show you how. But I know that this is it's going to be most likely a module. So then I go. I need to get the library. So if I don't want to download and compile it myself because it's not released, I still need a way to get the code. You see that the code there, it's split into many, different files. And I don't want this. I just want the simple thing so I can call the library as we saw before. I just want to call this one line of code. Basically, it gives me the GPU and all the thing. So how do I bundle this? Well, either I do it myself by downloading the code, or I find some kind of service online that does it automatically. So the library here is, if you publish, like npm is a repository where you have tons, like mostly all JavaScript libraries, so you can install them with this tool. So when you create, and you see it's actually quite popular, right? This is the weekly downloads. So it's basically a mirror of this GitHub page, and you have some kind of dependencies and a bit of info about how the usage, but it doesn't necessarily serve it easily for me to import. So what I would do is go on this other website, and you have many. It's called a CDN for Content Delivery Network. A JS Deliver is one, for instance. So if I go here, basically they say everything that is on npm or on GitHub, I can compress and serve to you so that you can load from my server directly. So here I'm searching for the library, clicking on the library, and then I don't want to use this script module syntax, so I want you to simply use the default. And now I would get this script, so it's a valid JavaScript file, but it's still not an IIFE, so we need to use the other technique to load it directly. So if I just, of course I can load it from there. But in Cables, we know that if you want to export the library, the patch to your computer, we don't necessarily want to load all our libraries from this remote server. So this is a weird example, because actually to benchmark, this library needs to call to the web to download the benchmark files. But if you think about it, it makes sense not to have this locally, because if you have to deploy on a hardware without internet, then you know the hardware, so you can adapt your experience. So I thought that this was an interesting library, because you are most likely going to deploy this online, and so you get access to the web. But coming back to here, what I would do is to just simply take this URL here, open a new tab, paste it. So this is basically the library. And now I'm going to create a new file on my computer. I'm going to paste this file in it. And then I'm going to simply upload this file to here, to my cables library. Okay, so this file here is exactly the file. I mean, you can download and open it. You can have a click here to see how it's on cables. You can download it, but this is exactly the file that I picked from here, the CDN. Okay, so now we have our library and we put it in cables. So the cool thing is that all our ops now can reference this, and we don't need to call this JS deliver. And it's also, we are fixing basically our API into one version of the op. So here 5.0.37, for instance. Of course, if the library gets updated, it's up to us to decide whether we want to update it or not. Okay, so now I'm back to my cables patch. And how do I load it, right? Because I said the other one was very easy. You just add to the library, and then it's immediately available for the window object. Here it doesn't work like this anymore. So how do we do it? So I made the op to show you how it works. So let me explain a bit. I don't want to live code because I wanted to explain and take more time for you to understand. First, you notice that we have this, for now, this is the code editor. It returns an error, but there's no error. It's just that the code editor is old and doesn't really recognize the syntax. So first, don't pay attention to this. First thing we need to do is to find where is our library, right? So when I uploaded my library here and I opened it in a new page, I checked here and I got basically the path to the library. So this is important to hard code this path, because if you use the op in another patch, you don't want to re-upload in the specific patch asset, right? But of course, if you export the patch, then it's going to be completely unavailable because you don't expect your local file to load /assets hosted on the cables server. So you have to make sure, if you want to really export your patch, that you download the right assets and you put them and you basically change the way they are loaded. And that's why it was much better to use the other technique, so that Cables can do this for you and wrap the right libraries and download them for you when you export your patch. But here we try to go around this limitation. So if I go back here, you see that I have the path of my library, and I use this get file path, which is exactly the same path for now, but I think that when you export it, if you want to change the folder, it will actually replace this by the right subfolder. So I'm not completely sure about this, but it's good practice to do this. It doesn't really change anything in our case, but it's, once again, when you think about exporting things, you can do this. Now, you need to change some things, I noticed, specifically when you are in the editor mode, because the modules they have specific requirement from JavaScript that have to be fully qualified, so that when you load a library, you cannot just load it relatively to the path. You need to get the full, so dev.cables, like the whole path to the asset. But it works when you are uploading it on the, when you're opening the patch on another page. You don't need to do this specifically. So I added this if you are in the editor mode. So here you need to do this, otherwise you just keep the full URL and the file path would be correct. This is just a way for us to load, basically to have the right URL. If you don't do this job correctly, then you would have a 404, you have an error here that says, hey, I cannot read the library. Once you're here, we need to now go back to the documentation of our library and know, okay, how am I supposed to be loading? What am I importing? And that's the syntax to do so. So if I go back to the detect GPU, I know here, okay, basically this is the way I need to import this object, and then I can do something with it. And if I go back here, and it's exactly going to be the same, because they're just repeating what they found on GitHub. So here I know, okay, I need to import. Now this is what I do. I put the full URL and I'm importing this get GPU tier, which is this kind of main function that we can use. And then I'm simply awaiting. So I'm saying this can take a long time, so I'm waiting for it to be complete to continue. And if you use this await keyword, then the function itself needs to be asynchronous. So if there's an await, you automatically have an in-sync that you need to put here. So if you're not very comfortable, this is a bit more intermediate JavaScript, I would say. Just try to follow the structure or read more about in the books that I linked in the previous videos, or ask ChatGPT to explain this to you, and it will do a very good job. Now we can simply test our library and see how good or bad our GPU is by just running the library. So what I would do is to trigger this once, I would say when I reload the page, or simply here, click, load the library and get the result. And maybe we can just print it on the screen with the text mesh. And it tells me, okay, this is a tier 3 GPU, which is the highest grade. It's not bad at a 390. And you can, it's not on mobile. So using these values here, now we can adapt our experience. So I hope this lesson was not too difficult. I know it's a lot to take in, and it's quite complex, to be perfectly honest with you, all this kind of modules and systems, but it works. If you have this IIFE, you can just simply load it in Cables and add the library from the assets. If you have a module, you have to do this other trick and basically load the module dynamically, but it works. So the sky is the limit now. But as you know, with great power comes great responsibility. Any library can talk to another, but it will increase the payload of your patch, and probably it will run slower the more library you use. So you have to make sure that the library and the function that you use are not redundant. And if you can optimize and redo, try to use the things that are already in Cables, if it's completely out of the scope of the main Cables project, for sure use libraries. I hope that you now have a better understanding on how to load and play with the different external libraries in Cables. And in the next videos, we'll try to put everything together, wrap another library, and conclude this series with a cool example. I'll see you in the next one.